The X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Rob McConnell's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the X-Zone Radio Show or endorsed in any manner by Rob McConnell, Relmar McConnell Media Company, the X-Zone Broadcast Network, its affiliated networks, stations, employees, or advertisers.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X-Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell, and we're coming to you live and around the world on the Talkstar Radio Network. Our toll-free number is 1-877-528-8255. Now, that is toll-free throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii at 1-877-528-8255. My guest this hour is Glenn Kimball, and we're going to be talking about everything from the Quran and subjects that you're going to find very, very interesting. However, before I get to my good friend Glenn, the top 5 signs your email inbox is too full. Number 1, your computer burps. Number 2, emails are actually spilling out onto the floor. Number 3, you're getting death threats from the IT guy. Number 4, your laptop has put on 50 pounds. And number 5, your email program has gotten a hernia. There you go, the top 5 signs that your email mailbox is too full. And joining me now is Glenn Kimball. And Glenn, how are you, my good friend?
I'm doing very good. How are you, Rob?
I'm doing fine, thanks. Thanks very much for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure having you on because you are one of the most interesting guys I know. And how's the university doing?
It's doing very well. My email is overflowing, and I guess that's what the hernia is on the screen there.
So how many students have successfully gone through your university?
Well, it's not a coursework where you have to do them all. There's been thousands of people who have taken individual classes. There's been 500 or 600 people that follow us every month.
My goodness.
On a continuous basis, and then considerably more who take the classes individually because the topics are of interest to them.
Now, Glenn, have you found an increase in people who are getting so interested in our past and how it applies to our present and our future? Well,
there's little doubt that there's a smaller percentage than you might think, but there is I would suggest maybe 10 or 15% of the people who express loneliness. Mm-hmm. They feel like they have gotten to the point where they know so much about history that they can no longer talk to their spouses, their friends, or anybody at a bar. Of course, you and I could, but
sure. You and I could have fun no matter where we were.
Well, that's true, and that's my problem is that people follow me home all the time.
Now, what does your family feel when the next morning when you've been out and they come downstairs for breakfast and there's all these strange people around?
Well, they always think that I'm the strangest of them all. I call myself the junkyard dog. There's the junk all around, but the dog is the big one,
What are we going to be talking about this hour, Glenn? I know we're going to be talking about the Quran. We're also going to be talking about the Pope. We're, of course, going to be talking about ancient manuscripts and how people can learn more about you and the great work that you do, letting people know what the actual history of this great planet of ours is.
Well, the biggest problem that we have in our day and age is that we see once again how culture has shaped our view of history, and especially with regard to the Islamic regime at this moment. 99.9% of the people who are Islam are very peace-loving people, have a great moral code, are above reproach, and then we have the idiots out there. And the idiots out there are the people who believe that the Quran is unchangeable. We're going through the period of time in the Islamic regime that the Christianity did during the Spanish Inquisition, to where those who are the radical elements of Islam would like to kill everybody who suggests for any reason that the Quran isn't the exact words of God.
Well, you know what? I've got to do something here that you know well about. It's called a commercial break. Glenn Kimball and I will be back on the other side of this break. www.ancientmanuscripts.com. My name's Rob McConnell. We'll be back in 2 minutes right here on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away.
Take a step back in time and discover old Florida cuisine at Marsh Landing Restaurant in Fellsmere. Enjoy delicacies such as frog legs, gator tail, catfish, and swamp cabbage, or enjoy the more traditional cuisine like hand-cut Angus steaks, ribs, and seafood. Join us for breakfast with a southern flair featuring sweet potato pancakes, biscuits, and gravy, and much more. Planning a party? Marsh Landing's private dining room can accommodate groups from 8 to 80 people. While you're visiting, enjoy the historic pictures, artifacts, and stories that line the walls. Marsh Landing is truly a unique experience. Marsh Landing Restaurant, 44 North Broadway in historic Fellsmere, or visit marshlandingrestaurant.com. Marsh Landing, old Florida cuisine at its best. Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone broadcast network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you interested in the paranormal, ghosts, UFOs, or psychic phenomenon? Join me, Tim Bartley, co-host of Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, coming mid-January 2017 to the XZBN. We will channel spirits live and talk to them, revealing all kinds of amazing information. Spiritual attachments will be found and removed on the show, and so much more. To find out when you can listen to Talking to Spirits with Lightworkers Tim and Justina, visit www.xzbn.net for listeners on both sides of the veil.
Welcome back to the X-Zone Radio Show. We are broadcasting live from our studio in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. That's right, the home of Red Green, Dave Smith. Well, let's see, what else is Hamilton known for? Well, we're a beautiful city. We're a steel town. We're on the shores of Lake Ontario, in between Niagara Falls and Toronto. What else are we famous for? Well, let's see, we're the home of the X-Zone. Hey, there you go. There's a claim to fame. And we're coming to you live on the Talkstar Radio Network. Glenn Kimball's our very special guest. And Glenn is an author, educator, and lecturer. He has successfully completed all courses on a Ph.D. in communications. He was the former president of International Exchange School and has taught school at Southern Illinois University. He has been collecting ancient texts since the age of 15 and is famous for being able to integrate very diverse texts into a very direct, honest, and sincere storyline. Now, due to censorship of time and doubt, most of the documents and oral stories chronicling the early life of Jesus were destroyed, lost, or forgotten. After 25 years of research, during which time Glenn visited museums, Indian tribes, medicine men, and universities, he assembled some of the missing links and solved the mysteries of Christianity. And Glenn, when we talk about the truth behind history, we're finding out in this day and age that history, as we understand it, was not really how it happened. For example, Christopher Columbus did not discover North America. Nobody talks about the central Mediterranean countries and people traversing the Atlantic Ocean to do trade with Central America. And when you look at the falsification of these historical accounts, I can only imagine how misinformed we are about the biblical times and the ancient texts.
Well, that's absolutely right. And it gets even worse from the time of Muhammad. Muhammad came at a very critical juncture in history. It came right after the creation of Catholicism, or I call it Roman Christianity. I have every respect for that. My wife's Catholic, for heaven's sake. And it came about 300 years after the Nicene Council. And by that time, Christianity and Judaism had screwed everything up so badly that it was almost incalculable the damage that they had done. They had lost millions of texts, millions of allusions, most of the story. For example, one of the classes that we're doing this month is on the Gospel of John the Baptist, and I'll bet there's not one single person in your listening audience who's ever heard of such a thing. And yet the Templars wrote about, had the sayings of John the Baptist, and there was a Gospel of John the Baptist that existed, and in our day it's lost. And how many of those things there are there? Well, I'd like to tell you maybe there's a dozen. We'll try hundreds of thousands of them.
My goodness.
And it's scary, and especially with regard to with Islam. We, as I was suggesting at the top of the hour, only I can do this with you. But there's a little joke to illustrate this point, and it takes about a minute. Is that fair?
It is fair.
Okay. Well, Jesus and Peter have a relationship, and so Peter's watching the pearly gates. Mm-hmm. And Jesus, he decides that he has a constitutional event that he needs to take place. He goes and he says, Jesus, will you watch the gates for a minute? I'm going to be gone for a few minutes. So Jesus says, no problem. So he goes out and watches the pearly gates, and he sees a little old man walking up the pearly path, and he looks at the man and he goes, my goodness, that man looks terribly familiar to me. And the little old crooked man raises his head and he goes, that young man looks terribly familiar to me too. And so by the time the little old man reaches Jesus, Jesus says, you know, you look so terribly familiar to me. You look like someone I haven't seen for a long time. You almost look like my father. And the little old man looks at him and he goes, that's amazing. I haven't seen my son for a very, very long time, and you could be his spitting image. And then Jesus goes, Joseph? And the little old man goes, Pinocchio? Pardon me, but that's how well we understand Christianity. Okay? We have missed the point entirely. And Mohammed knew this during his day.
You know what? I've got to stop you here because, you know, when you were talking about John the Baptist, you know, like I thought of something and I kind of let it go by because I figured, I can't do this to Glenn. But, you know, you know what John the Baptist's favorite saying was, eh?
No, where was that?
No, let's not lose our head over this.
Well, John the Baptist and Jesus were very great friends. They were family members, obviously knew who each other were.
Yep.
But the way we remember John the Baptist and Jesus is very differently. There were whole churches who thought that John the Baptist was the Messiah. The Mandaeans were one of those people, and the Templars were one of those people, one of those groups of people too. And so that's why when you go to Jerusalem, some of those caves that were found here a couple of years ago beneath the Temple Mount had pictures of John the Baptist, but did not have pictures of Jesus on the walls of those enormous halls that are 6 or 7 layers deep beneath the Temple Mount. They only had John the Baptist. It's because the Templars had been beneath the mount for 9 years, and had depicted in their pictures John the Baptist, but didn't mention Jesus at all. And so many people, by the time of the Templar movement, believed that John the Baptist was a straight shooter and that Jesus was a false prophet. And the reason for that is totally lost in our decade. We have no clue what the original problem was between John the Baptist and Jesus. And it's really quite clear that what really had happened is that John the Baptist's father, Zechariah, was the head high priest of the temple when he was born, which means that he was the guardian of what we call the temple protocol. Now, we have a view of what went on inside the temple of Solomon and the temple of Herod as being, hey, you go in, you slaughter a couple of lambs, you do a couple of dove things, or else you burn some incense, and that's your day of worship. I'm sorry, that's not what was going on inside these temples. What was going on inside these temples took a full 6 hours to perform. It was an entire school. It was the knowledge of the gods. It was amazing what they taught in these temples. As a matter of fact, there were people who would go into the temple and sleep in front of the veil, and would be wakened in the middle of the night by the high priest, and from their dreams they would solve their own illnesses, and they would see visions of nuclear physics, and they would see the astronomy of the universe. And where do you think we got these things? The scientists today think, well, they had to come from aliens. I mean, that's the only way we could have figured out how to move great big stones. Well, that's not how they did it at all. The way that these people in the ancient world did it is they had these very ancient temples where they had certain kind of rites where they would go in and they would discover the knowledge of the universe. That's where they got the information from. So John the Baptist represented that particular movement, this protocol that was going on inside these temples, and his father, Zechariah, was the head high priest of the temple. When Jesus came on the scene, he said, he made the comment that the temples had become places where thieves and robbers. And the last thing he did before he was crucified was he overturned the money changers' tables that surrounded the temple that were really called the bazaars of Annas. Annas, his 5 sons, and his son-in-law Caiaphas had been in charge of the temple for a very long time and turned it into a place to make enormous sums of money. And Jesus found that to be patently offensive. But Jesus never did work inside of a temple. And so here you have and Jesus said, I am the way to go to heaven. And here's the guys with the temple protocol saying, we're the way to go to heaven. So you have a natural diversity happening between these people of John the Baptist and these people of Jesus, both of them claiming to know the way to heaven, when in fact Jesus and John the Baptist never had an argument in their life. They were very close together and thought the same ideals. But the churches that came out of this movement were very diverse indeed and hated each other, to the point where in the Spanish Inquisitions, that Friday the 13th, 1307, the Pope actually executed an extermination order and had them burned at the stake, the Templars who believed in John the Baptist. So, and we're going through that very same kind of thing now with Islam, because now we have found these in the mosque in Sana'a, which is down in Yemen at the very far tip of Saudi Arabia. There were some German people helping to restore that mosque, and they found stuffed in the attic great big volumes of nothing other than the Quran, various versions of it. Well, you don't tell the Islamic world that there were a lot of different versions of the Quran, because that's tantamount to getting yourself bombed. That's why half of the colleges in California have refused to allow in their curriculum any mention of study about the Quran or Islam for fear of this Islamic terrorism regime. I find that the perfect way to ignorance.
That's right. And you know what, Glenn? I've been saying for years that the major problem with society and why there are so many wars is that we refuse to acknowledge, understand, and communicate our misunderstanding and exchange our beliefs with our fellow citizens of this planet.
That's correct. We all want to own the story.
Yeah, well, we've got to take another commercial break with the news, Glenn. Please stand by. Glenn Kimball's our very special guest His website is www.ancientmanuscripts.com. And X Zone Nation, if you'd like to give us a call and share your opinions, lines are open at 1-877-528-8255. That's toll-free throughout the U.S., Canada, Alaska, and Hawaii at 1-877-528-8255. My name's Rob McConnell. Glenn Kimball and I will be back on the other side of this news break with our commercial set as the X Zone continues live and around the world from our studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, right here on the Talkstar Radio Network. Don't go away.
This is the X Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
If you're a seeker, don't miss the inspiring book Shamanic Awakening, Between the Dark and the Daylight. This remarkable work chronicles shamanic counselor and indigenously trained dream decoder Sandra Cochran's 35 years of experience with diverse wisdom keepers throughout the Americas. Sandy's initiations across the British Isles, Turkey, Greece, and Egypt, combined with her knowledge of symbology, psychology, and myth, influence her dream blog and workshops. Sandy offers private readings, sacred international journeys, a meditative CD, and her book, Shamanic Awakening, to encourage you as you navigate your earth walk and create a deeper connection to yourself. Find this and more at her website, starwalkervisions.com.
Glenn Kimball's our special guest, www.ancientmanuscripts.com. Glenn, we were talking about the Quran, and aren't there similarities between the Quran and what's in the Bible?
Well, there are. Certainly, the Quran has the entire story of Jesus in it. It has the story of the family of Christ in it. The reality is that Muhammad received the Quran, supposedly dictated by Gabriel, on the Temple Mount where Jesus was crucified. He also had another vision of heaven and hell on that very same side, and a lot of people say, well, he was never there. He did that by remote control or of some way. But Muhammad was a camel merchant, and I can't imagine him not having the ability to go from Medina into Jerusalem at any given moment in time. He may not have. Many of the scholars in our day suggest that he never crossed west of the Jordan River, but I don't think that would have been impossible, certainly not an improbable idea. But the problem with the Quran is, to be in reality, is that even though there was a copy of it made during Muhammad's life, it was largely an oral document. And this oral document had because it was an oral document, there were many versions of it. And that shouldn't be a shameful thing. Many of the books of the Old Testament were oral documents. There have been many oral documents. For example, the Mayan calendar is an oral document. And by the way, the Mayan calendar has on that on the surface of it, the entire protocol of the ancient temple, and they believed in dreams and that's where they were getting their information from. There are a lot of people who suggested the Mayans were getting their information from aliens. Well, the Mayans never said that. The Mayans said they got it from their temples. But in any case, when we get back to Muhammad figured he was trying to correct the problems with Christianity, the problems with Judaism that existed in the 7th century A.D., and trust me, it was a complete nightmare. There was so much confusion, so many divisions, so much warfare, so much distrust and hatred being fomented at that time that no wonder a person like Muhammad would come on the scene and say, look, I really don't care about starting a new church. I would really like to unscrew the one that we already have, you know. But now in our days, we have this improbable suggestion that Muhammad instituted the only faith that ever existed in the world, which his was the Johnny-come-lately, to say the least, and that he had the entire truth in the Quran. That's for all our good Islamic people. I understand your faith. I appreciate your goodness, but that is completely preposterous. And every bit as much as that Christians believe that their Bible is complete, or that the Jews believe that the 5 books of Moses were complete, or anything improbable, or then the Mayans felt that their Shalom Balam and etc. was complete. None of those were complete.
So what is?
Look at them all.
What is the truth, Glenn?
The truth is really quite complicated, but it can be simplified to a kind of a simple equation, and then it gets more complicated from there. There have been 5 epochs of time where where human beings were on the earth, and the fact that we have lost the records of the 4 earlier epochs of time is a testament to the fact that we destroy our own documents. We as human beings are famous for the destruction of our own history. We look at these great buildings and the great science, and there were, at the time of Mu, and we're doing a class on Mu this month, at the time of the civilization of Mu, they had the ability with their towers to create weather. They had the ability to fly. They certainly had the ability. They had risen their agricultural ability to the state of the art where they didn't have to plant anymore. They were able to eat off the land. The land provided them with their food. And we can say, no, that's not the case, but I'm sorry, we have the hard evidence. We have the stone structures there. We have the writings about what they did. We have the artifacts about what they did. Ask Michael Cramo if you want to get a whole bunch of that stuff. Michael's a hero in our day for speaking out about
he sure is.
Things. Michael and I would disagree on the religious issues, but I don't think it's possible to view history without viewing it through the eyes of a person's most cherished beliefs. If you leave that out, that's like leaving out the college degree out of college. People taught via their religions, and they acquired their knowledge via their religions. They didn't acquire it in some ancient conservatory of with a telescope looking at the heavens. They didn't have telescopes which were capable of viewing the stars in the way we do today, and yet they had knowledge of those stars. They had knowledge of the movements of the planets. How did they get that knowledge? They get it conveniently from some spaceship that came down and says, oh, by the way, here's a piece of knowledge that you need to have. No, that's not what happened at all. They got it because inside each and every one of us is a connection with a 4th level society, and that's kind of where I wanted to get to. Michio Kaku talks about 3 levels of society. He says there's a society ahead of us that has the power to control the energy of a planet. The second level is a society that has the power and the ability to control the energy of a solar system. Then he says the highest one is a society that has the power and capability of controlling the energy of a galaxy. And my comment is, why did you stop there? because there are beings out there that are spoken of in these manuscripts that had the power to create the universe. Every bit of it. They did not need little spaceships to travel around. That would have been a preposterous thing. They can come and go at will, and we have millions upon millions of those kind of stories in our society where someone will pop up in the middle of nowhere, perform a rescue, you turn around and they're gone.
Are they still making those pop-in visits in today's society?
I've had one pop in on me.
All right, tell me about it. Tell me about it.
Well, I was about to throw my first book away,
mm-hmm.
The one called The Hidden Stories of the Childhood of Jesus. And I thought to myself, who in the world would read a book about Jesus written by an idiot like me? And I'm being very candid here, Rob. I said it would ruin my family. It would ruin my reputation. I would get flack forever. I just don't know whether I'm up for the grief. I learned about writing this book from a near-death experience that I had. But anyway, I had the text in my hand, and I was at work. And I took the stapled manuscript, and I was headed to the garbage can with it. I raised my arm. I'd already closed the doors and locked them, and this man walked in. And I thought, good grief, I thought I just locked that door. And this man had the most amazing ocean-colored eyes I had ever seen in my life, and trust me, I'm colorblind. I can't see colors. I saw a color I had never imagined existed. He sat down at the counter, and he said, and I said, can I help you? And he said, no, but I can help you. And, I'm kind of flippant. I said, I don't need insurance. Okay? That's exactly what I said. You know me too well, Rob. And this guy kind of smirked, and he said, no. He says, I want you to know that we know that you're about to throw your manuscript in the garbage. Do not do that, for tens of thousands of people will benefit. And it scared the crud out of me because no one could have known what I was thinking at that instant in time. I was alone. And I dropped everything in my hands. I bent over to pick it up. I stood up, and he was gone. And I had shaken this man's hand. I was totally awake. I'd recognize him if I saw him again. This person didn't come in a little spacecraft. He didn't flash me a beam of light. He came. He knew my mind. Gave me a piece of information which has been the underpinning of what I do in my life. And he's not the only one. How many people do you know that you have on your radio program that had a flat tire on the freeway, and someone appeared out of nowhere and fixed the flat tire, and they turned around and he was gone?
You hear these stories all the time.
I hear them incessantly.
Yeah.
I had a guy tell me one time, he says, I'm an atheist and you can never convince me. And I says, if I have an hour with you, I bet I could convince you. He says, okay, you got an hour. And he was the printer of the cover of one of my books. And I said, I'm not going to try and convince you. I just want you to run through your memories. And I says, isn't there something strange that happened to you in life? And he says, nothing's ever strange ever happened to me in my life. And he said, well, hold on a minute. There was that one little strange thing. I was driving down Van Nuys Boulevard in California in Los Angeles, and I heard this voice in my car that said, go around the block. And he says, I went around the block, and there was a car upside down on the other side of the block, and it was my mother.
Oh, my God.
And he said, and I helped her. He says, that was a little odd. And I said, you're telling me that you heard a voice in your car, told you to go around the block, and your mother's car is upside down on the other side, and you don't think something strange is going on?
So who are these people who pop into our lives at our moments of need?
Well, the Bible called them the Watchers. These are people from a former epoch of time, one of the four epochs of time, who had developed their goodness to a state where they were granted the ability to live with one foot in both positions, one to be at the foot of this fourth level dimension being, which we call God, and the other foot here on the earth, and they were allowed to tarry until the coming of the Messiah. Now, I know that sounds terribly religious to people who are not religious at all. Well, too bad, so sad. I can't help that, okay? But these watchers, there were thousands of them, thousands of these beings who had been given that promise. And they come and they go, and they come and they go. And you can say, well, I've never had that experience, but I promise you that if you ask 10 people in your life if they've ever heard of this, someone in their immediate surroundings will have had that experience or something close to it.
Is that why the Jehovah Witnesses call their magazine the Watchtower?
Without any question. Without any question. We know that the Templars depicted in the Rosslyn Cathedral, the Watchers, they call them. I mean, look at the Old Testament, the first book of the Bible. It's in Genesis. It says that when Adam and Eve came here, the men of old and the men of renown were already here.
Yes.
Well, who were these men of old and men of renown? If Adam and Eve were the first persons here, who were the old guys? Who are the renowned guys that were already here? Well, they were worthy enough to be interested in the daughters of Adam and Eve. Well, first of all, Daniel in the book of Daniel, he talks about having been taught by one of the watchers, and many of the old prophets in their temple experience had watchers come to visit them and teach them. And I could tell you more about my own life, but, you know, I'm the junkyard dog, and I don't mean to bore you with me. And I'm nobody special, and never would claim to be someone special. I mean, there's a lot of guys like Jimmy Jones and David Koresh who believe that because they had an experience that makes them meritorious of being the prophet and the leader of his religious movement. And trust me, that ain't me. And it won't be me, ever.
Tell me, do you think that we're in the biblical end times?
I absolutely do. The Mayans knew it. The Christians talked about the millennial era of time. The Chinese knew it. They talked about the final astrology epoch of time. We're in that epoch of time. The Egyptians knew about it. They spoke about this epoch of time. There were to be 5 ages of men. And at the very end of that age of men would come a cataclysm, and then would come a new 1,000 years of what they call millennial peace, or a new epoch of time, according to the Mayans, where there would only be one government, there would only be one religious faith, that things would change for the better. Christians say the devil will be bound. The Jews talk about it. Nostradamus talked about it. I mean, we could go through a liturgy of hundreds of people.
Glenn, stand by. I've got to take my commercial break. Glenn Kimball's our special guest. www.ancientmanuscripts.com. When we come back, more with Glenn Kimball and our final wrap-up of tonight, as the X-Zone is soon over for this week, right here on the Talkstar Radio Network.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
19 Sergeant Central. 19 Sergeant, check.
Officers on the scene.
Hi, I'm Larry Lawson, host of Paranormal Stakeout. With over 36 years in law enforcement, I have learned a few things. The most important is the proper gathering and preservation of evidence is vital to putting the bad guy behind bars. It's no different in the world of paranormal investigation. Whether it's the search for the afterlife, cryptozoology, UFOs, and extraterrestrials, how we gather the evidence, preserve that evidence, and present it to a jury of our peers will make the ultimate difference in proving the existence of worlds and entities that are beyond our imagination. Join me, Larry Lawson, every week on Paranormal Stakeout when, along with my guests, we'll take a journey to prove with indisputable evidence what man has struggled to believe for centuries. Go to xzbn.net for the broadcast schedule and check me out at paranormalstakeout.com.
True healing must address 4 levels: physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, for us to live joyful and productive lives. We tend to treat 3 of the 4, leaving the spiritual languishing. If you're tired of the same dysfunctional patterns cropping up in your life, Soul Balancing is for you. Trixie Phelps, owner and founder of Soul Balancing, is a naturally gifted energy healer trained in numerous esoteric forms, including shamanism. Trixie has created a powerful modality that safely and effectively clears your energetic field. A soul balancing session can remove interference, heal trauma, and restore your hope. Contact Trixie for a life-changing long-distance session today, www.soulbalancing.world.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. First of all, I hope each and every one of you have a super safe weekend, and I look forward to being back with you Monday night as the X Zone continues here on the Talkstar Radio Network. I'd like to thank our guest tonight, Les Bedrogi, my good friend, who is the man behind Invasec.com and askapi.org. Pastor Harry Walther was with us talking about Satan's Rapture. Elizabeth Joyce did psychic readings for one and all who gave us a call on 1-877-528-8255. And our guest this hour, Glenn Kimball, talking about ancient manuscripts. As always, Glenn, great having you on the show, but the time goes by too fast when you're with us, my friend.
Well, it does, and thank you. And by the way, I'm not saying anything against those who are alien investigators. Mm-hmm. Aliens are nothing more than contemporaries. The same level of society that we are, rougher, plus or minus.
So Glenn, the Watchers, are they like angels?
Well, they call them angels, but the angels are very different. They come in a variety of different categories, and that's probably a topic for another time. Angels, when you say who are the angels, to boil them down to one single entity is a complete fabrication, because they occupy different purposes, and some of them lived here and some of them did not. Obviously, the Watchers, who married into the family of Adam and Eve, did live here, and they were called angels. So some of them did, and some of them didn't. We'd talk about who they were and how we categorize them in some future program. But the fact remains is that Islam's going to have to calm down, because Islam, there's nothing a single bit wrong with Islam. You have to be able to understand that there was at least 6 versions of the Quran that Uthman left with us. The Quran was as good a rendition as an oral tradition can be, and to the extent that it makes people happy and have moral values and live successful lives, I think that's terrific. Anyone who's out there doing terrorism or bombing innocent people, you cannot think that that's going to take you anywhere near to a 4th level society, human beings who believe that evil is in fact the ending in and of itself.
Well said, my friend. Well said. Listen, let our listeners know how they can find out more about you and about your university.
Well, you can go to www.kimballcollege.com. You can get individual copies of the classes. There are audio books. I have a variety, several hundred books that are available on the site. Some of them you cannot find in America. Some of them I've got worldwide. I highly recommend people getting a copy of The Drama of the Lost Disciples if you don't have one. Begin there. It's launched 60 different careers. If you don't have a copy of He Walked the Americas, you are foolish. L. Taylor Hansen, who did not have a religion to tout, from Southern
Glenn, I'm sorry we've run
California.
out of time, buddy, but thanks again. You'll be back on again. Regards to the family. Glenn Kimball, www.ancientmanuscripts.com. To my producer tonight, Bill Madden. Thanks, Bill. Nice working with you again. Thanks for keeping us up on those 3 satellites in the sky, Galaxy 4R, Telstar 7, and Aglia 2, and on TalkStarRadio.com streaming audio. To my wife and senior producer, the lovely and talented Miss Laura Rogers, thank you, sweetheart. And to you, the X-Zone Nation, thank you for allowing us to be part of your day, your night, no matter where you are. So until Monday night, have a super safe weekend. Enjoy yourself, love each other, and always keep your eyes to the sky and your heart to the light.